lecture is a third, but he is going to deliver the lecture as a first number. He is going to talk on role of DPP-4 inhibitor from a renal perspective. And Dr. Saraf is a director, Department of Internal Medicine, Jupiter Hospital, Mumbai. He is a head of the quality control of Jupiter Hospital. He is an MRCP London examiner, DNB teacher, MD teacher and examiner, and he is a National API Governing Council member. So over to Dr. Amit Saraf, request him to start his lecture.
Thank you, Chairperson, Dr. Solanki, for that kind introduction. Thank you for the administrators for accommodating me and sort of pushing me ahead of the session because of technical reasons. It's always a pleasure to be on the show of Dr. Bansi Sabu. I think he's the main anchor man here. Bansi Bhai, it's a pleasure to be here on your platform and always a pleasure to talk on anything that you have crafted and executed because it's one of the best platforms to be on. So without further any ado, I would want to share my screen and start with my talk of this evening, which is, as was told by the chairperson, that I'm speaking upon DPP for the renal perspective. So at the outset, I would say that we are all aware about the role of DPP-4 per se in diabetes treatment. The main crux of today's talk was what is the role in a specific nephrology perspective. So we are all aware about this. There is nothing new here. We have all been seeing a steady rise in diabetes. Unfortunately, in the world, it's now declared a global emergency, and India, unfortunately, especially in Southeast Asia, leads the way where maximum number of diabetic type 2s are present. And look at this particular graph that the average control of HbA1c worldwide was mean at 8.4, and India, unfortunately, what 8.6, and that's nothing to be proud of. It's a very, very sad and a shameful figure to be very honest and frank about it. But can we do something about it? We as clinicians this evening, we've gathered together on the DiaCare Con, and last 2 days we've tried to deliberate on this simple map that can India have a better A1C control. So that is the need of the appropriate treatment for the Indian diabetics. And what are the challenges that we face in India? We know that the usual factors are that we have a greater abdominal obesity, visceral fat at any given BMI. We have a higher waist circumference and waist hip ratio. We have a lower level of adipokine and high plasma leptin, increased concentration of triglycerides, low rate of glucose disposal, impaired insulin secretion, and thereby increased resistance of insulin and genetic factors. So we are all aware of this. What are the possible reasons that, in spite of knowing all of that, why can't we intensify the treatment? So there's certain patient factors such as pill burden, fear that something may go wrong, the cost of therapy, obviously in India, and the treatment factors such as clinical inertia, wait and watch approach, dropout on multiple pins. So there are many reasons because of which an Indian clinician may not want to intensify early. But we've all seen, all cut out throughout all these years of ADA and EASD and even the RSLDI guidelines, that we have seen a much better control, whether it's a monotherapy going on to dual therapy to triple combination therapy. Finally, we see that the earlier we get a better glycemic control, we see that we add on to the better life years of the patient, and better is the A1C control. Vis-a-vis, if we do not do that, what are the consequences of a delayed intervention? As clinicians, we are all aware of this, that if we don't, we are, as the A1C rises on the left-hand side graph, as we can see, on the right-hand side, we can see the months and the years, unfortunately, steadily decline, and vice versa, for people who had an A1C less than 7% before the first year of diagnosis had a better life efficacy in terms of MI, strokes, heart failures, and even composite CVE at 62%. So that's basically the blood glycemic legacy and the drive risk of complication. This is what, ladies and gentlemen, the UKPDS tried to tell us so many years prior, that legacy, the glycemic legacy, the better it is, the better for the patient, the bad it is, the much worse for the patient. So what are the factors we consider while choosing an anti-diabetic therapy for glycemic goals? So basically we have to choose and pick the risk potential associated with hypoglycemia, adverse drug effects, disease duration, life expectancy, important comorbidities which may be present with type 2 diabetes, established vascular complications, patient preferences, obviously, and the resource and support system also, the last but the most important point. And this is all published in Diabetes Care 2020 in this ongoing year, which made us choose the patient therapy factors. Bottom line of it all was that we've seen over the years fixed dose combination in diabetes were much more crucial for effective control in terms of clinical inertia being not there, adherence to be a little better, and patient compliance also was better. And amongst the FDCs, I think the metformin and DPP-4 FDC was considered an excellent option due to its strong pathophysiological rationale, the robust efficacy, and basic safety and tolerability was much better with this. So, what are the currently available DPP-4 metformin formulation in India? So that brings me to the crux of my talk, wherein I'm going to now concentrate upon metformin and the saxagliptin combination, which we have is one of the fixed dose combination, which is with the extended release metformin available in India, and it has a better control, more convenience, reduced compliance, as we shall see in the slides to come. So need of the hour, obviously, as we see in the earlier slides, if we decrease the patient factors for use compliance in terms of number of pills, I'm going to now concentrate upon compliance. And convenience of patient is lost, and therefore the compliance and convenience is better. There is a better 24 hours control with a single pill, and thereby compliance is better. So the point being, the extended release metformin with saxagliptin as a fixed dose combination works via a gel technology, wherein the gastric fluid can enter the tablet, cause the polymers to hydrate and swell, following a jet matrix, and the gel matrix eventually, gradually over a period of time, gives a sustained extended release over a period of time, leading to a better glycemic control than the initial combination of only Saxa with metformin versus metformin alone, as very rightly proven by these two typical graphs out here, where we can see the advantages of both. The adverse GI effect which we as clinicians have seen with metformin immediate release compared to the metformin extended release is again very well depicted here, that immediate release can typically give rise to what we call, and we've seen clinically, as a dumping syndrome, hypotendencies, GI intolerances. But with the extended release, we've seen that it scores much over the immediate release, thereby leading to obviously increased adherence compared to the immediate release. Patient population base, when studied and who was shifted from immediate release metformin to an extended release metformin, the A1C was improved from 9.1 to 8.4, and that was almost 19% better, and a very, very significant p-value as well. What about the pharmacodynamics? I think efficacy, the initial couple of slides have proven. Anything to do with pharmacodynamics? So we've seen that when this combination is taken, it was done as a study design of a 4-week multicentral and multinational centers with adults between 18 to 77 years of age were taken with type 2 diabetes. A1Cs was 7 to 10%, and saxagliptin 5 versus the placebo add-on was given with the metformin 1500 milligram to 2000 milligram and once a day with meals. And it was seen that Saxa with metformin extended release versus up titering of metformin only plain extended release was seen that there was more drop in A1C baseline with Saxa metformin combination extended release than up titering only the plain metformin. So this p-value again was significant for the combination. The intensive control reduces the microvascular complication of type 2. Again, the UKPDS findings, that is one trial we as clinicians should always be adhering to as a benchmark. And it has shown that better the glycemic control, better the microvascular, better control and reduction of the microvascular complication was also seen. Long-term, almost 30 years reduction in complication of intensive control was seen. And thereby the key takeaways of this study was that 35 to 60% reduction in early microvascular disease was seen with a mean A1C of 7% vis-a-vis the uncontrolled diabetics, and a durable effect of initial assignment despite the loss of metabolic control reduction in long-term complications. Now, that brings me to the third aspect of my talk, that where does this FDC stand in terms of a chronic kidney disease patient? So I would want to draw the audience's attention to the DPP-4, that's the fourth column from the left-hand side, and look at the green bars all throughout. That whether it was CKD 1, 2, 3A, 3B, 3, CKD 4 and 5, I believe cut across the entire Sita, Saxa, Lina, Vilda and Telnigliptin drug threshold available, hardly any dose adjustment was required in all the spectrums of CKD. That's a very, very sort of important thing for us clinicians to note. Taking it further, when individually the molecules were compared from a CV safety point of view, CV renal point of view, sorry, the dose modification at CKD3B was hardly there for Saxa. Lina also didn't require much. Sita, a further modification if the eGFR was less than 30 ml an hour and below, and Vilda required nothing. Hypos, all of them required no hypo risk were there. Glycemic efficacy in hemodialysis patient was available in 3 unknown for the Lina molecule. The CVOT trial also established that primary endpoint of non-inferiority was met in all 3 of them except the Vilda, because they didn't have a published CVOT as yet. We are expecting one coming out in 2021. And the CKD trials at all stages in CVOT trial has shown that Saxa was quite ahead compared to its own other molecules of the same family. And the renal safety and long-term data was available for all four, and reversible between proteinuria and microalbuminuria was statistically significant in CVOT. Again, the data was available for Saxa, but not so much as for the others. So basically, Saxa evidence with CKD perspective have shown that there was an improvement of ACR irrespective of the glycemic benefit. It's basically seen in the SAVOR-TIMI. So SAVOR-TIMI has very robust data showing that this particular molecule has shown a good amount of control in preventing the proteinuria and thereby the microalbuminuria and proteinuria and reversing it back. So almost giving a kidney safety profile when the patients of type 2 with CKD are put on a Saxa combination. And statistically improved ACR was seen in basically on saxagliptin baseline 39 to 22 over years. This was the real world evidence from Italy on albuminuria on patients with saxagliptin. As we can see here, that at baseline, if the eGFR is 84, end of the first year it became 85, and ACR, if it was baseline 39, at the end of the first year it became 22. So I think pretty robust and very significant p-value significant data is shown on this particular slide. So if the eGFR is maintained along with the reduction of A1C, together it could possibly improve the underlying progression of cardiorenal disease, and treatment with SAPSA improved ACR even in normal albumic without affecting the eGFR. So the SAVOR-TIMI, Saxa, and the cardiovascular outcome patient with type 2 diabetes result analysis based on renal parameters and outcomes have shown that primary endpoint being patient with any effect from composite cardiovascular non-death or a non-fatal MI or a non-fatal ischemic stroke. And the analysis of renal was shown the composite of a doubling of serum creatinine level, initiation of a patient on dialysis, renal transplantation, or a serum creat of more than 6 milligram per deciliter. The prior composite renal endpoint together with death was also seen. And what was the study proving at the end of it? That a total patient who had an average eGFR of 71 to begin with a normal to mild renal failure, that is eGFR more than or equal to 50, moderate renal failure, that's 30 to 50 eGFR, and a severe renal failure, that's less than 30 ml/h of eGFR, have less frequently treated baseline with metformin sulfonylureas, which more frequently with insulin. But patients with severe renal failure, older and more frequent, had a longer duration, higher prevalence of urinary ACR, high levels of N-acetylcholine fragment of natriuretic peptide, which with normal renal function. So SAVOR-TIMI at a 2-year cardiovascular endpoint according to renal function have shown that patients with definitely more than 50 ml/h eGFR had a better outcome in terms of CV death, MI, ischemic strokes, cardiovascular death, and hospitalization for heart failure compared to the ones who had a eGFR less than 50 ml/h to begin with. And the frequency of progression to microalbuminuria with composite health as per the renal function was shown that saxagliptin definitely gave an advantage to the patient compared to the placebo arm, as shown by the green bar on this slide here. That improvement was seen in the patients who were put on Saxa compared to the placebo groups. The risk of progressive albuminuria was defined as a treatment difference in number and proportion of worsening, no change in improvement of urinary albumin to creat ratio, defined as shift from baseline to the duration of patient with complete data. So p-value was definitely much more significant here. The SAVOR-TIMI, the frequency of renal and glycemic endpoints according to the renal function. Again, if you see at the bottom, people with more than 50 ml/h of eGFR again had a better sort of survival in terms of not requiring doubling time of dialysis, renal transplantation. The creatinine also settled. The hospitalization of hypoglycemia because of hypoglycemia and the initiation of insulin therapy was much lesser in people with eGFR of more than 50 compared to the people with less than 50 of eGFR. So Saxa compared to Lina from a renal perspective, again we have compared between Carmelina trial and the SAVOR-TIMI, which has clearly shown that when it came to saxagliptin, the endpoints have shown clearly in terms of both these molecules that Saxa had a little bit definitely better advantage in terms of prevention of doubling of serum creatinine, prevention of dialysis to a large extent, prevention of renal transplant, and prevention of serum creatinine in more than 6 milligram per deciliter compared to Lina on head-to-head comparison trials. And progression and reversible albumin microalbumin was by completion of therapy in SAVOR-TIMI again showed that Saxa had a better advantage compared to the other standard antidiabetic drugs. So the eGFR patient included in this trial, less than 15 eGFR obviously not taken for the Carmelina. The SAVOR-TIMI on the other hand had chosen patients of that, and we have seen that they were definitely benefited on a saxagliptin arm. So improvement in efficacy with Saxa in dialysis patient with no adverse effects was seen. and the PPG risk also decreased significantly the postprandial glucose in the Saxa arm compared to the others. And there was no risk of hypo with Saxa at all. So from a renal perspective, I think what the last couple of slides have tried to show us that we can try as clinicians to go down to a very, very low eGFR when it comes to saxagliptin with no much risk of hypoglycemia and a good sugar control as well. So basically to conclude with, I think early and individualized treatment approach is recommended as per the most guidelines for diabetes that we are all aware of. Early intensive control with combination of antidiabetics will give a better patient care for both glycemic control. This Saxa and metformin extended release FDC is the only once-a-day formulation available in the country, which has shown much more better control as compared to metformin alone. Early intensive treatment can reduce the macrovascular risk complication in type 2 and, as I said, give them a better glycemic legacy. Saxagliptin has not shown any nephrotoxicity. For Saxa, renal protection endpoint was evaluated in SAVOR-TIMI, which we've seen was not inferior in any way to the standard of care. And Saxa is one of those few DPP4 inhibitors having this renal protection analysis. In addition to this, saxagliptin has shown evidence of 32% reversal of proteinuria and 31.3% reversal of microalbuminuria, and doesn't increase the risk of hypoglycemia in the bargain in mild, moderate, or severe renal failure in patients, including those on hemodialysis. So that, in short, ladies and gentlemen, was my summation of a particular molecule, saxagliptin, amongst the DPP4 family, and with a combination of metformin. I think we as clinicians can give it much more liberally in our type 2s with a renal involvement and try to achieve a better glycemic control and take India away from that shameful 8.6 A1C control worldwide, which is seen compared to the others, and try to get a better glycemic control to our patient. Thank you so much, everybody, the chairpersons, the organizers, especially Dr. Bansi Sabu, for his opportunity. It is a pleasure, as always, to be on this particular platform. And I will hand it back to the organizers. I will end my slide sharing now.